welcome back everyone. So we come to one of the most interesting sessions where in the 2 days or 1.5 days we've been discussing about different innovations. Now we talk about how do we go about getting these informations to be implemented in cities with support from administration as well as political support to the innovators as well as innovations. So to have discussions on this topic, we have requested the city administrative officers to be part of this, as well as people who are running institutions to support and promote innovations and incubation centers. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Achalendra Reddy Garu, IFS retired. He is the director of Center for Innovations in Public Systems. Please keep the applause going, please. Thank you very much. Welcome, sir. Please welcome Mr. Manas Rath, founder of Leap Cities. I'm grateful to Ms. Pravanya, Commissioner, Greater Warangal Municipal Corporation, for spending these 2 complete days sitting on the front row, listening to everything so attentively. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for joining. Thank you. Please also welcome Ms. Harichandana Dasari, Collector, Narayanpet, Telangana. She's joining us online. And I now invite the chair of the session, Mr. Srikanth Vishwanathan, CEO of Janagraha Center for Citizenship and Democracy. Thank you, Srikanth. So Srikanth, this is a very important topic, and we have many city representatives and elected representatives here in the audience. So of course, you're a pro at this, but please do find ways of even engaging the audience in your conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malini. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to the last session, panel discussion before the valedictory, I guess, and a very important one. There are 400 million citizens living in India's cities, and I guess the collective goal for all of us is to ensure that every citizen in every neighborhood and every city has access to high quality water, sanitation, and hygiene services and outcomes. And that really defines essentially the need for scale. This is one of the largest problems confronting humanity itself, the wash challenge in India's cities. And so to get it done, you need innovation, and to reach the last citizen in the last neighborhood, in the last city, you need scale. Now, while innovation happens when government works very closely with business, academia, and civil society, those of us that works in or with government knows well that nobody can scale it like the government, when they want to, that is. And that really sums up the substance of today's conversation. What is the role of the government in replicating WASH innovations at scale? Because we have to confess that our cities don't particularly have a stellar track record in scale or in replication. So I like to say urban India is the graveyard of pilots. Many of them begin as pilots and best practices. They depend on individual initiative, individual interest, and there is no institutional continuity. Today, we have a terrific panel, a group of policy advocates, administrators, subject matter experts, who I hope will unpack the mystery of shaking the government into scaling innovations in WASH. Please let me welcome Ms. Harichandana Dasari, IAS, District Collector of Narayanpet District. Welcome, Ms. Harichandana. We have Ms. Pravinya, Commissioner of the Greater Warangal Municipal Corporation. We have Manas, who is the founder of Leap Cities, And we have Dr. Achalendra Reddy, retired IFS and Director of the Center for Innovation in Public Systems in ASCII. So we have a great balance, whichever way you come in and dice in. We will plunge straight into the conversations. Given that the preference in the 21st century, particularly post-COVID, is always to the digital medium, we will start with Ms. Harichandana. Ms. Harichandana, are you able to hear me well? Can we do a quick mic check with Ms. Harichandana? Okay, even as we get her back, maybe we can get started. I'm going to start with Manas. Manas, over the last 8 years, both with the Swachh Bharat mission and perhaps other state-specific initiatives, we've gained unprecedented visibility for the wash sector. So in some ways, one even wonders, is scale even a problem in the wash sector? When the government of India, when state governments have acknowledged and recognized the significance of wash and put the full might of budgets and policy levers behind it, is scale still a problem? And if so, why?
Thanks, Srikanth. Thanks for the question. So I'll answer with the context. I'll just make two statements. At Leap Cities, we look at cities holistically as a connection of various systems and not as individual problems or individual departments. Second is we believe that quality of life in Indian cities can be improved for everybody, whether you're poor or rich. We all live suboptimal quality of life in our cities, and therefore that's the perspective with which I'll answer your question. So I think there are 3-4 areas where there's still the need. It's not just about scale, but we have to also think about quality that goes with scale. Scale without quality is half the job done, right? With Swachh Bharat mission, I think the opportunities that still lie ahead, whether it's called SBM or it's called something else in the future. One is how do we integrate the whole toilet and the water and the sanitation issue with other parts of infrastructure, social and city infrastructure, such as your housing, such as public spaces, and the general experience of living in Indian cities. How do we make it more sustainable, more livable, and more healthy, right? So I think there's a lot of work still to be done in integrating Swachh Bharat mission and toilets and so on into these other aspects of city life and infrastructure. Second is the agenda is still not complete. We have declared, based on certain technical criteria that we chose, we declared open defecation free, etc. The fact is, are you really open defecation free? Is open defecation free really the standard at which we want to call that the game is done? And that's when we come down to the quality of the public toilets and the community toilets in the country are still often very, very poor. A huge percentage of people still don't have access to household toilets, right? I ask people often, I say, if I offered you a really swanky 3-bedroom apartment free of cost in a very nice high-rise building, and I offered you a not so nice quality 3-bedroom house in a sort of 20-year-old shabby building, the difference is that this really fancy 3-bedroom house has got no toilets. You have to go downstairs and share the toilets with your neighbors. And the other one is a regular 3-bedroom with attached bath. Which one would you choose? Until now, nobody has told me that they would choose a fancy apartment where they have to share toilets with, with their neighbors, right? So we need to think about household toilets not as, it has to become the norm, right? The third thing is, are we looking at toilets and cleanliness from an integrated perspective? The recycling, the reuse, the circular economy, our water body conditions, the waste on our, maybe it's off the street, but now it's off into more hidden corners of our cities and of our environment. So I think that's a large unfinished agenda. And then lastly, I would say is that, how do we think about the business models and the city institutions that will then sustain this into a 20 or 50-year journey, right, till it becomes a habit. And I think there again, there is some undone work. So I think there is definitely a need for scale and for focus on what are those goals. It's not a 5-year, 10-year goal. What's the 20-year goal? What's the 50-year goal? Which Indian cities and Indian states still need to be thinking about when it comes to Swachh Bharat mission.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Manas. 3 key things that I took away from what you said. One is the importance of quality, not just thinking of scale in terms of numbers. Second is the holistic nature of the wash problem. The fact that it's interconnected to aspects like housing. So you have to put the citizen at the center of it. Think of the city also holistically. And the third, of course, is on sustainability. I now want to come to Ms. Pravinya. Ms. Pravinya, when we say scale, we think of large numbers. But Manas right now spoke also about first, what I call first mile service delivery, which is how do you make sure that within the home, right, and in the context of a citizen's everyday life, wash becomes a real agenda. And therefore, your role as a city manager, someone who effectively runs, a reasonably large city in India, how do you see scale? Because scale for you, in some sense, is city-level scale. It's not just about saying, let's roll out a large scheme pan-India, but it's about saying, how can I make sure that every citizen in Warangal has access to safe and inclusive wash services and outcomes? So how do you see scale at a city and sub-city level?
Thank you, Shrikant. As a commissioner for a city which has a population about 11 lakhs today, scale is a very important aspect for us to consider. And Warangal is one of those cities where a lot of experiments are done, a lot of pilots are done, and we've seen a lot of success with all these pilots, but scaling up requires essentially IEC, behavioral change, and most importantly, support from the government in terms of finances and all-round support from the public also. So one of the initiatives where scaling has actually worked is the way we collect our household waste today. So we have about 350 Swachh autos now, and half of them are actually on the driver cum owner model, where the loan was given from the government and the auto driver had to pitch in an amount of money. So he actually owns the auto, but he's also working for the corporation. Now, that is a scale which could have been implemented very well only because there is ownership from the person who's actually owning the auto, and at the same time, he's working with the corporation. So that has helped us actually pick up waste from the doorstep of various colonies on a day-to-day basis. So that is one example where I think we have managed to cover at least 75% of the city with these autos. And the remaining 25% is happening through other informal networks, but at the end of the day come to the same transfer stations and the same final segregation centers. So scale as such, I think when we see a pilot, after the successful implementation of the pilot, we need to bring together all the stakeholders. It could be from the public representatives, it could be from the local public, the resident welfare associations, the subordinate staff of the own corporation need to be on board to ensure that it is scalable. And similarly, it is equally important that scale has the right amount of finances that we can put in. Now, generally, for doing a pilot, we are very open and enthusiastic about it because it costs really little. And we want to see some change. We want to see that there is a success story out there. But replicating it is quite a challenge, and we require a lot of support from all stakeholders involved.
Thank you. Ms. Praveenya, before I go to Ms. Harichandran, I have a follow-up question to you. You gave a really good example of how a pilot got converted into something that covers now more than 75% of the city. But do you see it as an implementation issue or as a scale issue? Because if it is aren't the two slightly different?
Both are definitely different. Implementation issues will come up even during the pilot. You can actually see where the breakpoints are, where we are diverging from what the original goal is. But scale is replicating a successful pilot on a large scale. So that would require all stakeholders to be on board. Implementation is more about how set your practices are, how your subordinates or the stakeholders who are involved in it are understanding the nuances of the entire new process that they're adopting.
Thank you. Ms. Harichandran, are you able to hear us now?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you for joining us. Were you able to hear what Manas and Ms. Praveenya said? Otherwise, I'll give you a quick 30-second brief.
Yes.
Okay, so we are talking...
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, so the question I have for you, Ms. Harichandran, is you've seen WASH perhaps from the vantage point of the state as well as the district. And in the district, you have the unique ability to look at it across rural and urban. So do you see scaling of WASH as a challenge? Despite significant funds and policy backing that the sector has received over the last 8 years, is scaling a challenge in WASH? And if so, why?
Actually, I have been a part of WASH from the beginning, from the time that WASH initiatives had started as an online platform and then have moved forward. So I have been seeing a lot of very good entrepreneurial energy and also startups who have come up with great ideas on how to innovate, have brought forth very good innovations in the sanitation sector. But many of them have not scaled up to the levels that we would want them to ideally. The reasons might be different. They would have problems with financials, or even many startups do not thrive well in government setup. So I think initiatives like this, where we sit across the table and where we bring together both the government and the non-government sectors together and bring forth all the perspectives together, much more are needed, because we need to understand each other better. We need to understand our own strengths. Like government has the strength of scalability as well as implementing it quickly. So once we decide that something has to be implemented, it gets implemented very fast in the government setup. But it is that decision.
Ms. Harichandran, if you could pause, I think we can hear you from the laptop, but we've lost the venue volume. Give us a second, please.
Okay. Is it audible now?
Yes, please go ahead.
So I don't know where I got lost. Maybe you can tell me. From what I can tell, I was just trying to say that governments and startups, as well as NGOs and other academia, every organization brings in a particular strength to the discussion. So the discussion forums like these, like WASH forums, give us that perspective, the other perspective of how things can be. Like I said, when you talk about scalability, many of the startups, I have worked with a lot of startups during my tenure in GHMC, as well as working in the districts also. I can just say that some people or some startups rather, do not see through the journey. They have a brilliant idea. They start out well, and but it's not just starting out well, it's also the persistence to continue on the journey that you start. So that is a kind of a small missing factor, which I can say why many of the startups don't end up in the big league or the continue their journey. So it's I mean, the journey is tough for all of us, because sanitation, like my co-panelists have been telling, is not a singular concept. It's a dynamic concept. You have to bring in a lot of factors together. You have to also take in a lot of public participation into consideration. And it is not dependent on one single actor to get it executed. Like, even if the government wants it, the public also should be motivated enough to come forward and change their attitudes towards these things. So it's a long haul, it's a long journey. So all of us have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, Ms. Harichandran, I have a follow-up question. How significant is innovation in the WASH sector? Because we are now seeing unprecedented amounts of capital flowing into the sector. We are seeing significant political capital being, kind of placed behind it, both at the union and state levels. And the entire state machinery at various levels is pretty much treating WASH as the most important deliverable, so to speak. Then why should we obsess over startups and innovation? It almost seems like it's an implementation and scale issue within government, rather than a question of innovations or startups. How would you respond to that?
I would say, see, each of us have our strengths. And like I said, the government's strength is in implementing it very quickly once it decides to do so. And also, I would not say that government is totally against or anti-startup, as you were trying to say. I would rather say that, in fact, the government innovation in this sector, like, the focus on cleanliness and all the WASH activities from the state government government and the central government have been provoking this thought process from the startups. They have been provoking this thought process across the country. So different people are coming up with brilliant ideas on this. Like I can tell you, there's one example from Bangalore where all these Ratiwalas were united together by an NGO. So once the government only took up this initiative of Swachh Bharat and cleanliness and all these sanitation activities, then only this could happen. So even innovation responds to government need and public need. That is what I'd like to say.
Okay. Thank you. We'll come back to you in the next round. I'd now like to bring in Dr. Achalendra Reddy. Dr. Reddy, I'm essentially persisting with that same line of reasoning of, in terms of, if you apply an 80-20 lens, is this an implementation issue with respect to WASH, or is it an innovation issue?
సభకు నమస్కారం అండి. The point that he has asked, ఇన్నోవేషన్ అనేది ఒక ఆస్పెక్ట్, స్కేలబిలిటీ అనేది సెకండరీ ఆస్పెక్ట్. నేను తెలుగు ఇంగ్లీష్ రెండులో మాట్లాడతాను. ఇన్నోవేషన్, టు బి కాల్డ్ యాజ్ అన్ ఇన్నోవేషన్, ఇట్ షుడ్ బి ఎఫెక్టివ్, ఇట్ షుడ్ బి ఎఫిషియంట్, ఇట్ షుడ్ బి ఫీజిబుల్, ఇట్ షుడ్ బి యూస్ఫుల్, ఇట్ షుడ్ బి వయబుల్, it should be sustainable, then only it can be replicable. That is one part of the innovation. But the other part, it is for the political executive as well as the official head of the organization, especially local bodies, urban local bodies తీసుకున్నాం అనుకోండి. ది పాలసీ మేకింగ్ లెవెల్లో పొలిటికల్ ఎగ్జిక్యూటివ్ ఉంటారు, ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్ లెవెల్లో అఫీషియల్ ఉంటారు. సో దేర్ ఆర్ టూ టైప్స్ ఆఫ్ స్కేలింగ్, ఒకటి హారిజాంటల్ స్కేలింగ్, ఒకటి వర్టికల్ స్కేలింగ్. వర్టికల్ స్కేలింగ్లో కమ్యూనిటీ పార్టిసిపేషన్ నుంచి, అఫీషియల్ నుంచి, పొలిటికల్ ఎగ్జిక్యూటివ్, ఈ ముగ్గురు కూడా ఒక లైన్ ఆఫ్ థింకింగ్లో సేమ్ పేజ్లో రావాలి. దే షుడ్ కమ్ ఆన్ ద సేమ్ పేజ్. దెన్ వాట్ విల్ హ్యాపెన్, ది పొలిటికల్ ఎగ్జిక్యూటివ్ యాజ్ ఈజ్ ఎ పాలసీ మేకర్, యాజ్ ఎ పాలసీ ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్సర్, అండ్ అఫీషియల్ అండ్ ద కమ్యూనిటీ పార్టిసిపేషన్ ఈజ్ ఆల్వేస్ షుడ్ బి ఎంకరేజ్. సో టు మేక్ ఇట్ స్కేలబుల్, మనము ల్యాండ్స్కేప్ ఆఫ్ ఇన్నోవేషన్స్, మనకున్న ప్రాబ్లమ్స్ ఏంటి, ఫస్ట్ ఆ ప్రాబ్లమ్స్కి తగినటువంటి ఇన్నోవేషన్స్ వాష్లో ఎక్కడ ఉన్నాయి, వేర్ దే ఆర్ అవైలబుల్, వాట్ ఆర్ ద ఇష్యూస్, వాట్ ఆర్ ది ఆన్సర్స్ ఇన్ ద ఫార్మ్ ఆఫ్ ఇన్నోవేషన్స్ అవైలబుల్ హ్యాస్ టు బి లింక్డ్ అప్. ది డాట్స్ హ్యావ్ టు బి లింక్డ్ అప్ ఆర్ కనెక్టెడ్. అప్పుడు ఒక ఫ్రేమ్వర్క్ వస్తుంది. దెన్ వీ విల్ గెట్ ఎ ఫ్రేమ్వర్క్. ఫ్రమ్ దట్ ఫ్రేమ్వర్క్ వీ హ్యావ్ టు సెలెక్ట్ దట్ ఇన్నోవేషన్. దెన్ ఇన్నోవేషన్ వెంటనే రిప్లికేట్ చేయొద్దు, ఎందుకంటే ఇట్ ఇన్వాల్వ్స్ కాస్ట్, ఇట్ ఇన్వాల్వ్స్ ఎక్స్పెండిచర్. మనందరికీ తెలుసు ఆడిట్ డిపార్ట్మెంట్ అనేది ఉంటుంది గవర్నమెంట్లో. ఎందుకంటే నేను 34 yearsలో పనిచేశాను కాబట్టి ఎవ్రీ టైం గవర్నమెంట్ అఫీషియల్కి ఏదైనా రాగానే ఫస్ట్ ఆడిట్ అనేది ఒకటి మైండ్లో వస్తుంది. ఆడిట్ ఈజ్ ద ఫస్ట్ పాయింట్. ఎనీ ఇన్నోవేషన్ అనేది మనం, ఇట్ ఈస్ యాజ్ ఐ మెన్షన్డ్ ఆల్రెడీ, ఇట్ ఈస్ ఎ న్యూ థింగ్. ఇప్పుడు న్యూ ఆస్పెక్ట్, న్యూ ప్రాసెస్, ఇట్ ఈస్ ఎ ప్రాక్టీస్, ఇట్ ఈస్ ఎ కాన్సెప్ట్, ఇట్ ఈస్ ఎ ప్రాసెస్ అనేది ఇన్నోవేషన్ని కాన్స్టిట్యూట్ చేస్తుంది. అటువంటిప్పుడు మీరు ఒక ప్రాక్టీస్, ఒక ఇన్నోవేషన్ తీసుకున్నప్పుడు డెఫినెట్లీ మీ ఆడిట్ అండ్ అకౌంట్స్ డిపార్ట్మెంట్ నుంచి ఆబ్జెక్షన్ వస్తుంది. ఇది మనకు ఎఫ్ఎస్ఆర్లో లేదు, ఫైనాన్షియల్ షెడ్యూల్ ఆఫ్ రేట్స్ ఉంటాయి కదండి, లేకపోతే బిల్డింగ్ కోడ్లో లేదు, సివిల్ వర్క్లో ఎటువంటి కన్స్ట్రక్షనే లేదు మన దగ్గర, లేకపోతే ఈ ప్రాసెస్ అనేది ఎప్పుడు మేము గవర్నమెంట్లో వినలేదు. అక్కడి నుంచి మొదలవుతుంది ఇక ప్రాబ్లమ్స్. ది ప్రాబ్లమ్స్ స్టార్ట్ ఫ్రమ్ దట్ ఎండ్. దేర్ఫోర్, if the political executive and the official manning the urban local bodies, they should have an open discussion that this is a new innovation. There is no precedent in the government so far. Therefore, we are going to accept it, and we are going to have on a pilot basis. If the ఇన్నోవేషన్ అనేది మనము ఇంప్లిమెంట్ టోటల్గా రిప్లికేషన్లో ఒకటిసారి పోతే, బై ఎనీ ఛాన్స్ ఫెయిల్ అయితే, దెర్ విల్ బి హ్యూజ్ క్రిటిసిజం ఇన్ ద మీడియా. వాళ్ళు మన సిన్సియారిటీని ఎవరు యాక్సెప్ట్ చేయరు. సిన్సియారిటీని యాక్సెప్ట్ చేసేది గవర్నమెంట్లో జనరల్గా ఉండదు. జనరల్గా ఇప్పుడు కొత్త ఆలోచనలతో వస్తుంది, కానీ అందువల్ల ఏమవుతుందంటే ఇన్నోవేషన్కి అక్కడే బ్రేక్ పడిపోతుంది. అంటే ఆ అర్బన్ లోకల్ బాడీకి ఏ ఇన్నోవేషన్ చేయదు. That urban local body, if they replicate on a large scale at one stroke, thinking that that particular innovation is very effective, then there will be a huge furor both in the media and there will be people who will be criticizing it. Therefore, piloting and testing they should do it. Once they do it, then scalable is possible. It may be in one urban local body kaavachu, pakka local body kaavachu, inkokati adoka case that will become a case study for us to this thing. Another aspect of scalability problem ఏంటంటే ఎప్పుడు కానీ ఏ పని కొత్తగా చేసినా ఫస్ట్లో ప్రాబ్లం అంటే దాన్ని డాక్యుమెంటేషన్ ప్రాపర్లీ చేయాలి. ఇఫ్ సంబడి క్వశ్చన్స్ యూ వాట్ యు హ్యావ్ డన్ ఫ్రమ్ ఏ టు జెడ్ ఏం చేశావంటే, బాబు ఈరోజు నేను ఇది రాశాను, ఈరోజు ఫైల్లో నేను ఇది రాశాను, ఒక సింపుల్ మనం చేసిన పనిని బ్లాక్ అండ్ వైట్లో ఫైల్లో పెట్టాలి. Then the process will have a simple brochure తీసుకురావాలి. This ULB has taken this innovation for replication and we achieved this percentage of success. గవర్నమెంట్లో కానీ ప్రైవేట్లో కానివ్వండి 100% పర్ఫెక్ట్ యాక్టివిటీ అనేది ఉండదు. ఇది నా పర్సనల్ ఒపీనియన్, యూ మే డిఫర్ విత్ మీ. దిస్ ఇస్ ఎ డిగ్రీ ఆఫ్ పర్ఫెక్షనే. 90% పర్ఫెక్షనా, 80% పర్ఫెక్షనా, 75% పర్ఫెక్షనా, 50% పర్ఫెక్షన్ అనేది చూస్తారు తప్ప నో ప్రాసెస్ విల్ బి 100% పర్ఫెక్ట్. సో విత్ దిస్ ఐ విల్ hand over to chair of the session and next.
Thank you, Doctor. You brought out the very important point of vertical and horizontal scale, where we talk about horizontal scale most of the time and not the vertical scale, which goes down to the community. But I want to go to Pravinya. I think she had a comment to make in the context of the conversation with Ms. Harichandana. And also, if you could also throw a little bit more light, continuing from what Dr. Reddy mentioned, which is what is really the challenge that the government is facing to convert pilots to scale. You did call out one issue, two issues you had called out. One is on finances and the other is of co-opting the various stakeholders. Because for a pilot, probably you don't have too many stakeholders. But for scale, you need wider buy-in. If you could elaborate on those aspects as well.
So in continuation with what Chandana ma'am mentioned to your question, whether innovation is actually needed in the government with respect to the WASH initiatives which are there, I think that's a definitive yes, because there are issues with the present implementation. Whatever we are doing today, there are a lot of issues in the processes that we are doing or the optimum way in which we can handle our sanitation sector. But however hard we work, however we try to streamline it, we may probably able to achieve 2x. But if there is an innovation which can help us improve it better, it would probably go to 100x. And that is where an innovation is important. And it will help us save a lot of time, a lot of manpower, a lot of funding, all put together. So that is where... Both, in terms of scalability, in terms of quality, in terms of the efficiency with which a sector can function. So I think innovation is important from that perspective. A very simple example for that is we have sweeping machines today. And that kind of cuts down cost of a lot of manual sweepers that we have on the main roads. And now we are able to comfortably deploy the sweepers who used to sweep the main roads into internal colony areas, which we couldn't take up earlier because we did not have sufficient staff. So these are very small technology changes which have helped us optimize our resources and make it work better. Going forward with what Acharendra sir mentioned, I think the stakeholders for any government person at a leadership role, I think personally I would say I have 5 to 6 people that I have to always keep in mind. The first one being my staff, my executive engineers, my Ds, As, how would they respond to a new project that I'm asking them to take up? How would they be able to take it forward? And second is my superiors. How would the response be from, say, the special CS or the CDMA at the state level? Would they like this project to be taken up? Third would be the public representatives, because without their support, it is not really possible to bring in a lot of initiatives that we come across or all the innovations. Fourth would be probably the general public itself, and how would the resident welfare associations or people living in various areas respond to the project that we want to do. And 2 more people, the next segment would be the people who would be experiencing some sort of a disruptive change because of the initiative that we want to bring forward. For example, the rag pickers were people who had to face a lot of disruptive change once we started segregating the waste through the department itself. So how do we inculcate these people into the model that we are proposing and streamline the entire thing? Last but not the least is the media. So they definitely have a role in taking forward whatever we are doing and putting a larger perspective, a scale perspective to what we are taking forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Praveenya. So just to summarize the conversation so far, I think there's a deep acknowledgement of the need for scale and also the need for innovation in scale, because you brought out the fact that scale is not just about reaching a certain number of people. The innovation could also be in reaching the number of people, could be in achieving quality standards, or even in achieving all of that with greater degrees of efficiency, like the example you gave about mechanical sweeping and so on. So I guess there's an unequivocal acknowledgement of the need for innovations at different levels. So I want to now, through that, segue into the next segment of the conversation, which is product innovation versus process innovation. Because a lot of emphasis presently appears to be on product innovation, on solutions, which are oriented towards a particular product or a particular use case. But the conversations that we are having now appear to indicate that when you move from a pilot stage to a scale stage, whether within a city or all across, there is a need for process innovations, which is how do you get many collaborative people to buy into this? And how do you innovate in ensuring that you have adequate finances, adequate capacities, etc., to move from pilot to scale, and also cover the downside risk of many of the aspects you mentioned, Dr. Reddy. So are we emphasizing too much on product innovation and under-emphasizing on process innovation? Do we need a conversation that says innovation is not a single word, it's not a one-size-fits-all? I'll begin with Manas.
Sure, absolutely, Srikanth. So to me, I think process is where the problem lies. If we went back to technology and products we had 40 years ago, we could have achieved everything we're talking about today even back then. Other countries did it, right? We had enough technology. Maybe it was more expensive. Maybe it required more manpower. Maybe it was more difficult, but it was doable back then also. And today also, with all the innovation and the product and the technologies and so on, we're failing in many ways. It will take time to happen. That's fair. But I think the process is very important. If you look at corporate R&D and corporate innovation also, it is not the companies that are necessarily investing the most in R&D that are successful, but they have a certain process that they build in where there's also continuity. You build upon what came, you set realistic targets, and you keep building on those targets. What happens today is that very often we have a stop and start process. Somebody comes in, somebody likes something, they start it. That's where the pilot happens. When that person goes, or once the ribbon is cut, or the attention moves to something that is a newer, shinier toy, then that is dropped. And then you lose the momentum that you're building up, you lose it. So it's like stop, start, stop, start. So I think product innovation is fine. It is important. It brings down costs. It improves quality. But if we don't get the process right, we will still get 20% of the advantage of our product innovation, and 80% of the benefit that should be flowing to people and to our environment and our ecosystem will still get lost. So I think the way we think about financing innovation, who is responsible for it, the continuity of the tenure, setting a long-term 5, 10, 20, 40-year target and making sure that the accountability in achieving those becomes very important, because something like WASH and infrastructure cannot be subject to election cycles. They cannot be subject to 5-year programs. You don't get very far. And then you backtrack, and 8 years down, you see that 30, 40% of what you achieved in 5 years has reversed because there was no ongoing continuity. And that is the process innovation we need at the urban local body level, at the state and center levels, but also in how these different levels of government interact with NGOs and businesses, and how they support each other into an ecosystem. We keep talking about ecosystem, but we don't operate like an ecosystem. We are still disparate entities doing our own things with our own timelines and priorities. We are still not an ecosystem. And bringing people together is a start, but bringing people together once in a while is also not an ecosystem. We need to be working together in a mutually reinforcing manner. And that is, I would say, we are 2 on 10 today.
I have a follow-up question for you, Manas. Can you help us unpack the role of the government? And government is also not a single word, like we said about innovation. You have the union government, you have the state government, and you have the local self-government, besides, of course, various other dimensions to the administration itself. But can you unpack for us the role that you see at the union level and the state level for fixing what we just now discussed? And also across various aspects of WASH, because you spoke about toilets, Pravinya spoke about solid waste management, and there's also the issue of grey water, etc. So if you could unpack for us both levels of government and what you would like to see them do with respect to innovation and scale, and also sectorally.
Well, that's a huge question. So let me take it slightly differently, if you don't mind. I'll lay out what I think are the 3-4 principles, and they may apply differently because even state government, the capabilities, the priority vary so much across our different states. So it's not like it's standard at a state level across all states, right? But I think, broadly, I would say there are 3 roles that government needs to play. And I think in different ways, all 3 levels of government need to play it across all 3 areas. The first, I would say, is probably the most important, is to create an environment of good competition. Now, we are raised thinking competition is good. I feel that too much competition is also bad, because when there's too much competition, people become short-termist. They can't invest long-term because they say, I don't know what will happen next year. So I want to extract as much as I can today, and we become very short-term in nature. What can government do about this? First thing is we need long-term plans. When there's a plan, even as an entrepreneur, or as a corporate, or as an investor, we know what is going to come. So we're not just optimizing or acting for today. We can build today into a plan of what innovation do I want to do, how much do I spend on R&D, how much money do I raise, how much money do I invest, seeing that there's a certain plan for the next 10, 20 years, right? So I think planning at a city level, at a state level is extremely, extremely important. Without that, we will, we'll be very localized. The second is that we need good regulations and good monitoring. When there is no monitoring, the best rules encourage bad competition. You take sewage treatment plants today, great rule, every large building must have a STP. When you don't monitor those, the builder wants to get the cheapest solution, which will not work, but they get their OC. So you're not solving the problem. You're wasting money. People are spending those 50 lakhs and crores of rupees on a system which will not work. So actually we're doing disservice to society, raising the cost of living without getting any benefit. So getting good monitoring, I think that is if the government can get that in place at the lowest price, the greatest impact the government can have is enforce the rules. Of course, there are a lot of issues with that. We don't need to go into that, right? I think having standard metrics and some comparables is important. The second one I would say is financial support. And here there are 2-3 things. One is government should become a good customer. We talk a lot about the US and free markets and all. The US government, through all the different departments, is the biggest customer and supporter for high-tech. They will be the customer for high-tech solutions and innovation for 30 years before businesses and customers can afford those solutions. And government, therefore, needs to become a good customer for innovators and for innovative solutions, whether they're coming from big businesses or from small startups, right? Second, of course, there's some stuff happening on the funding side, etc., so that will evolve. But we also need to build a continuum, not just early stage. People say, let 1,000 flowers bloom. That is good, and that's important. But we also need to pick those most promising flowers and help them to become big. And today, that is a big gap in the WASH sector and in a lot of sectors where, once you pass that early stage, how do you scale up is not very clear, right? And then things like tender norms, are they supportive to innovation and to small businesses? A lot of, tender norms are based on established technologies. And I can understand government also needs to reduce risk, right? They cannot be the customer for every risky thing out there. But we need to find a balance on certain things where new technologies, especially, we have a company called Vision Earthcare. They build, ecological STPs. They've done 300 systems. It's way beyond any kind of proof of concept and risk and all. And even then, most of the STP tenders have got clauses which disqualify biological STPs from being delivered, right? So these sort of things, we're losing a lot of opportunity. And the last thing I would say is that, I think the government of India at all levels needs to, if we want to achieve any kind of global status, we need to go straight for the highest quality sustainability that is out there. Everyone thinks, oh, it's expensive, oh, it is that. Rubbish. You can spend 10% more. You're going to spend 100 rupees anyway. Spend 15 more and get absolutely, every building, as Professor Chari said yesterday, 70% of the real estate in India, which will be standing in 2050, is going to be built in the next 30 years. I would say every building in India, whether you're making your house or you're making a building like this, must be LEED Platinum certified. You cannot get permission if you're not LEED Platinum certified building. It's not an option. That is the level of commitment we need, and therefore, I say, net zero at 2070, Mumbai says net zero at 2050. I say, why? Let's achieve it at 2030, it's doable. So I think, pushing the envelope, demanding compliance, monitoring players, giving the right incentives, all things that are doable. And I think that's the kind of, ambition that we need, imagination and ambition that we need, and the roadmap to achieve some of these things. And I think the government can play a role in all these.
Very well spoken, Manas. I mean, you spoke about the need for better planning. You spoke about the need for government to be a good customer and, kind of be a customer of, be the customer who's willing to experiment and willing to provide risk capital for these kind of products. And you gave the example of the US. And pay well and on time, of course. And also monitor, which means stay through the entire life cycle. Don't just make a regulation and not follow through, like the case with STPs in apartment complexes, etc. And of course, the need to kind of incubate a good competitive environment. You spoke about all of these. I want to go to Ms. Harichandana. So many of these, Ms. Harichandana, the way I see it, are about state capacities, are about the government ensuring that it does the basics well in order to create a competitive, congenial environment for innovation to bloom all across. Do you see any challenges in that presently? Do you believe there is there is a need for greater finances in WASH? There is a need for greater skills and competencies within government in WASH? The need to tighten some specific regulations of the nature that Manas pointed out. How would you respond to whatever Manas kind of commented on right now?
Actually, like my co-panelists were talking about it before also, many innovations only focus on the product, like you also pointed out. Many of them do not factor in the process of implementation and how do they go about it. And finances, I'm sure I was having a look at the earlier session. There is so much of opportunity for financing good initiatives and startups. And once it's a good scalable idea, I think it will definitely take off. The way I found it, at least practically during my tenure everywhere, was that, you start small, start with a pilot. Start thinking about what are the practical problems once you start implementing it. And that's where even the government is learning with these pilots, because we also know what are the challenges in implementation, what is the way forward, and is it really scalable to the scale that we anticipated to. So these are things that we need to factor in when we are planning our initiative. And once we do that, and like I said, any earlier also, anything which you decide, you need to see it through. There will be problems, there will be course corrections, and sometimes we even have to rethink. I've worked with a few Alu companies who had to rethink their entire design based on the practical applicability of it. But only when you can think on your feet, only when you can respond quickly to challenges, it's going to be a successful initiative. And that's the same from government. We are also looking at scalable initiatives, but we have to be very careful with public finances when we are taking up a project. So we have to be ultra cautious about it. And sometimes it takes time to move quickly, because we are it's obviously bureaucracy, so we have to move cautiously. We cannot jump the gun like how private entrepreneurs wanted to. So we have to balance out all these factors. We have to bring in the thought process which is there, which is a dynamic thought process in the startup sector. And we have to bring in the practicality of government, because we bring in the scale of implementation. And it's also the because WASH is mostly public welfare. So we have to work on getting public participation and taking people along. We can have a brilliant idea about a toilet, but if it is installed and nobody uses it, it's not going to work out. So that is how we have to factor in all these factors, and we have to keep thinking on our feet. That is how it moves forward, and that is the success of any initiative.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ms. Harichandana. That sets up a really good question for Dr. Reddy. I want to take two short comments from Dr. Reddy and Pravinya before I come to the audience. The question I have for you, Dr. Reddy, is the following. Manas is recommending that as far as fundamentals are concerned, climate change, water and sanitation, etc., where you have proven use cases and technologies, he's saying set the bar high. Don't continue to drag your feet, go slow and think small, right? But Ms. Harichandana is also bringing in a very important perspective, which we continuously hear all across India from administrators. The fact that an idea is only as good as the government is able to implement it. Because the risk of failure in government is very high. You alluded to it in your earlier comment. The fact that because we have such a vibrant democracy and media, if something fails, people don't acknowledge that there is risk capital that happens, you have to iterate. And therefore, the risk-taking appetite within government is really low, right? So how do you marry this? How do you marry this dichotomy of saying we have to be more ambitious, we have to do things faster, set a high bar, but at the same time, there are practical challenges of the nature Ms. Harichandana called out in terms of public finance, in terms of capacities, in terms of managing the downside risk of failure. How do you manage this? You've been a senior bureaucrat in government for 30 years. You've implemented large projects. How would you respond to this as a senior bureaucrat yourself, or what would you recommend be the response of the government?
Thank you, Srikanth-ji. You raised a very good point. This is the crux of the whole issue in adopting and implementing and scaling of the innovations. Now, just for a while, I'll little bit deviate from the question you just. When we are implementing certain developmental things, this comes under development administration, our WASH innovations and others. There are three levels of government: central government, state government, local government. We have seen the constitutional amendment, then what happened afterwards, and how the urban local bodies have been strengthened and all those things. Now, water is a state subject, constitutionally. So, the point నేను చెప్పేది ఏంటంటే మనము పాలసీ ఫ్రేమ్వర్క్ ఇన్నోవేషన్స్ రెప్లికేషను వాటి వలన మనకు సొసైటీ కలిగే లాభాలు, ఎఫిషియన్సీ, ఎఫెక్టివ్నెస్ పెంచడం అనేది వన్ ఆస్పెక్ట్. బట్ కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్ రోల్స్, పాలసీ ఫ్రేమ్వర్క్ కూడా కొంత మనము ఫోకస్ చేయాలి. దట్ ఈస్ వాట్ ఐ డీవియేటెడ్ ఫ్రమ్ ది, బికాస్ దట్ ఈస్ ఏ సపోర్టింగ్ regulatory or policy infrastructure, you may call it. So that is one point I would like to highlight. No, decentralization has been already made, but the decentralization process has to be understood in right perspective. So as I mentioned, when you are taking up certain activity in for example, one big municipal corporation, now, the innovation is available, WASH innovation, let us take. But there are many innovations, but what is the felt need of the public? Which is the very acute problem in this thing. That you tackle first to gain the confidence. Because any given point of time, government means problems, public means problems, and democracy means more problems. That is a fact. Democratic country, to run any democracy, you have to be participative. It cannot be imposed. నేను చెప్తాను వినాలంటే డెమోక్రసీ నడవదు. అది వేరే కంట్రీస్ టైప్ ఆఫ్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్. ఐ డోంట్ వాంట్ టు గో ఇంటు దోస్ థింగ్స్. సో బట్ దెన్ that is where you have to accept. That's why I told that no process in the government is 100% perfect. It cannot be. So to what level? Yeah. So that is one point. And then process, should I highlight that? Yeah. Yeah. There should be some changes in our way of working. I'll quote whatever I observed in my this thing, how I tackled one issue. I'll not go to the details, but give you telegraphically the dotted this thing. See, if you wanted to have certain innovation startup from Mr. Manas, then people say you are favoring Manas. The first point that comes up this thing. I know that Manas innovation is far better than Harichandana's or Praveenya's. I have to take a decision, but decision should withstand the scrutiny of law. How? You have two types of evaluation of a tender. You call Manas, what are your strengths, you take it. I am telling openly. Take those things into the technical bid and financial bid. You give marking more for the technical bid. Transparent aa jaye. You are favoring Manas subjective, but putting, तीर्थ जब तक पुजारी नहीं देगा, वो तीर्थ नहीं बोलता है. तो उसी तरह, so this is how we have to tackle the new practices. So this is how, then nobody can question it, even court cannot question it. Yes, I need something new and something effective, efficient, so we have done it. So we all know how financial bid and if you want quality, technical bid should be given highest priority, not the financial bid. Then you have a marking for that, we can easily do it. We have done it. Those administrators in the government who wanted to be sincere, those who want to take risk, they have convinced political executive also, and they have taken the risk. This can be done. This has been done. There are many case studies in government. That is one point. Now, the other aspect, if you one more point or 2 points. Finances. See, there are different levels of investors. As already mentioned in the previous this thing. Investors also have a different mindset. Banker will have different mindset. Local center, the available, whatever the local non-banking finance institutions have a different mindset. Okay? Now the point I would like to this thing, government can intervene in the form of viability gap funding. If there is something available, 20% कम हो रहा है, तो government को उसमें आ सकता है. For example, I may be corrected also. Many collectors have untied funds. Untied funds क्यों? Because to meet any exigency, to meet disaster management, you have a separate head of account in each local body. Unconventional and innovative work. उसके लिए 2 लाख 3 लाख वो हेड ही ओपन करिए. Nobody can question. No central whatever controller and auditor general also will not question you. You open the account by passing a resolution, and then the government bring a policy. With each urban local body, commissioner will have one head of account called, like collector has untied fund, innovative, unconventional works. Then nobody can question if collector spends from that head of account. In the budget allocation itself, in the general body meeting, they allocate budget for that, and the political executive and the commissioner can experiment on this. And also mention that, because I faced many problems in Goa when I started ecotourism first time, formally. The accounts and audit people, they came heavily on me. How can you spend when you forest fellow? You cannot spend for ecotourism. You are doing the tourism department job. This is 1998 ka baat bol raha maine. So then I took the help of one brilliant director of planning and accounts. At that time he was there. I can tell the name also, Dr. Chalam. I went to him. I am facing problem from the state accounts department. Then he gave an idea. We have a Western Ghat development program. My joint secretary is coming from Government of India. You suggest that open a head of account called ecotourism in the 24. I am mentioning the number 2441 Western Ghat development program. The joint secretary has come. I placed before him. Immediately he went to Delhi and sent back that this head of account can be included in the 2441. And nobody can question me. I have been doing the tourism job in the government. That is called ecotourism. So this is how the problems have to be solved. Okay.
I think 2 excellent points on procurement. I think the 2 very important points on procurement reforms and how seemingly small bureaucratic sarkari interventions can actually make things easier. Like the point that you made on account heads and on the need for untied funds, and also some meta issues like leveraging decentralization, etc. So some very good points there. Praveena, if I can come back to you after taking a few questions or comments from within the audience. Maybe I can get 2 voices first, one from within the government, one from an entrepreneur. And what I would request is a question rather than a comment on working with the government. Can I have a mic for Mr. Kasba, please? A mic for Mr. Kasba. Mr. Kasba, if you can keep your comment or question short, then we can make it more participatory.
Yeah, I'm Rakesh Kasba. My request is only on factor of time. So how would you mitigate in the government the factor of time? Rest all is perfect, wonderful.
You mean government delays?
Government delays.
Okay, okay.
It is not factored in the activity. That is my observation. How can that be resolved?
Okay, we'll take a few more questions. Any questions? Yes, please introduce yourself, and can we have a mic to the gentleman in the front row? Please introduce yourself and short question or comment.
I am Dr. V.K. Chaurasia from CPHO, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. We are implementing Swachh Bharat Mission and Amrut. I have seen very rich discussion that is taking place, but in Government of India also echoing the same thing. We are also thinking that how to get it accomplished. And for that, our approach across the Government of India is how to improve that service delivery. Nowadays, we are trying to move backward.
Excellent.
That how to improve service delivery. Service delivery will improve when whatever the process or system is there, that is affordable. Affordable means economic model as well as skill that is available with ULB. It is very easy to see you do capacity building and all the things, but it will take time. Overnight, it is not going to happen. So to handle that, within the available capacity, what type of process we should bring so that is affordable and it helps incrementally. I heard Manasji also what you are mentioning. Of course, that time will come, but overnight we cannot adopt the best technology and go on the top. Let it be incrementally done. In the process, a capacity building happens across all ULB. It is an incremental and growing process which will sustain. We see, I would like to mention one example that in case of used water, if you see as per CPCB record, 72,000 MLD waste generation is in urban area. Out of that, around 36,000 MLD capacity is there, but effectively even less than 17,000 is being treated, I think 20,000, so 17% effectively. What has happened? The innovation that should have gone in the process and technology selection, that has been not done to the level it is required. Mostly we have taken from Scandinavian countries the best technology that is available, but when it comes and implemented CapEx, so it is very easy to do, but when it comes for operation and maintenance, often people don't have, our ULB don't have money to operate and maintain, and they simply bypass. So the reason is 72% of untreated wastewater is going in our water body and land, and only some 26-27% is being treated. So this is not, this should not be our objective, that create such an infrastructure that is not sustainably operated and maintained, but go in incremental manner. We are even suggesting that what is going untreated and containing 200-250 BOD, first focus on that. Even if you provide a primary treatment, 50% BOD load will come, and that is going to drastically improve, rather than making more stringent norm from 20 or 30 BOD to 10 BOD. That is really, because I find at many point of time, even State Pollution Control Board, they should also come and think, because this knowledge base is creating a lot of problem. If you see in sea, lot of dilution is there. What is necessity for treating this 10 BOD, 10 COD? All these things is because treatment is a cost, no? This is a cost, and it should be need-based. In case of agriculture, if we are going to do, why we are doing that? So all these factors we have to see.
Sure.
Just 1 minute regarding this innovation also, this system has not been there in a formal manner. Now at Government of India level, at various places, there is a system where entrepreneurs will be taken and hand-holded. So all those shortcomings we have been able to discuss,
Sure.
They are going to be taken care.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chaurasia. Appreciate that. I want to next go to Deepthi of WeHub, who's doing a terrific job of incubating enterprises with a strong emphasis on gender. So Deepthi, you would have heard the conversations where there appears to be an overemphasis on product innovation rather than process innovation. So in the wash sector, the panel believes there has to be a lot of emphasis on process innovations. Like, for example, Dr. Reddy spoke about procurement reforms. It's an area that's totally underemphasized. And I know that you've been discussing how there has to be greater gender intentionality in procurement, and how gender can be a greater catalyst for widespread change. I guess even in the wash sector, there's emerging evidence that suggests that greater voice and agency for women can lead to better service delivery and outcomes. So if you can speak about as an ecosystem enabler of startups, what do you think startups need to do in terms of mindset shift? And what do you think the government needs to do in terms of mindset shift on this particular point of process innovation? And also Mr. Chaurasy's point is also related, right? There appears to be a need to bridge the ambition and innovation of startups with feasibility of implementation within governments. Some comments from you. Can we have the mic to Deepthi, please, on the first row? Yeah, if you can just pass it front.
Thank you, Shrikant. So, quite simple. I think there needs to be a translator of sorts between the ambitions of the startups and the implementation capability of the government. And that is why I think the innovation ecosystem that we've created in Telangana is uniquely placed for that exact reason. So coming down to the startups, as Harichandana ma'am, I remember, I think the third time I met her, she had actually spoken about how to actually have inclusivity in procurement, we need to actually have inclusivity starting at the policy maker level itself. And that is the first thing I actually remember ma'am's, we had spoken about it. So I think with Pravanya madam being there and Harichandana ma'am and so many stakeholders being there is a lot of focus on inclusivity already in terms of, let's say, not just in terms of gender, but also in terms of startups, innovation and so much more. So that is already being done. And coming down to Achalendra Reddy sir's point, it is very nicely made, sir. So coming down to the process improvement, sir, if I may, the example that you quoted worked for you because you're already in the system, right? If let's say as somebody as VHub, we try to do the same thing in a system, it will not work. So what we have actually started to do while complementing the existing mechanisms, we've actually started looking for pilot projects within the government itself, where there is already a fund earmarked. So instead of trying to say that, we have to disrupt the entire procurement norms and, change the world, what we've actually come up with is there are already untied funds, as sir has already mentioned. There are already, passionate municipal commissioners and collectors and so many brilliant officers that we have in the Telangana government who are focusing on certain problem statements. And we are making sure we reach out and we connect the startups who are solving the problems that that department is trying to solve. And very happy to share, Shrikant, that we've actually facilitated close to 3.9 crores of procurement only over the past 3 months. And one of the things that we are doing is that the startups who have actually been qualified for this have been paid 50% of the procurement cost on the day they sign the contract. So that we are doing these upfront payments and all that. And for that, we have created an SOP. And I think that is one way that has actually worked for us. And we hope that more and more entities also within the government and outside the government also work with us. Coming down to the startup ambitions, a small comment here is that I had made this comment previously also, is that every startup founder is brilliant, right? That is one thing we know. Second thing is every social entrepreneur is passionate and they want to do something great. But whatever change that you're making, is it suitable to the government department you're targeting? That is kind of lost always, right? So that is something we would like to really request that all startup founders pay a lot of attention to. And second, scale, that Chandana ma'am spoke about. And third, Pravinya ji also made a brilliant point, right? She said we are doing so many pilots with the MAUD department in Telangana. You see so many initiatives, but they're not scaling. Why? Because the startups, replicability is a challenge. Thank you.
Thanks, Deepthi. It almost appears that a lot of innovation needs to come into doing the basics right. Because you almost think of things like planning, public finances, procurement, etc., as being fundamental aspects of governance. So it almost looks like two things are emerging. One is that you need a lot of innovation in doing the basics right. And second is alignment of interests. There's no point in inventing the world's best idea whose time hasn't yet come, and for whom finances are not available or capacities are not yet available within government. So an alignment of interests and priorities between government and other stakeholders and platforms like WeHub or even Inkwash which facilitate this kind of an interaction and discourse with hopefully time-bound action items appear to be quite important. One or two last voices from within the audience before we go to for last comments from the panelists. Yes, there's a lady in the green there and a gentleman here in pink shirt. Sorry, for the others, I request you all to take it offline. There's a lady in the green on the LHS. I'll take these two last comments from the audience and then final word to the panelists before we close. 1 minute, sir, if you can allow the lady to finish.
It's a lot to get your voice heard. I'm Dr. Disha Ahuja from Ahuja Engineering Services, and I'm working in the solid waste management sector, specifically building biogas plants. So there was discussion around how there's a mandate for buildings, institutions to set up STPs and ETPs, and how there is no sort of follow-up. So there's a lot of defunct STPs and ETPs. But in the solid waste management sector, we are even more further behind. There were solid waste management rules passed in 2018. But where is the mandate for the institutions to take ownership of the waste and to set up composters, to set up biogas plants? And how will we make that change? How will the municipalities or the government start to mandate this and not simply take the waste and send it to the landfills?
Request Pravinya to respond to that once we take the other comment also. A short comment or question, sir. Please introduce yourself.
I am Dr. Rambabu, Chief Entomologist, GHMC, sir. My additional commissioner also here. My question is, sir, my question is to Inkwash. Actually, in the GHMC, we had 185 lakes, sir. We have a problem of waterization. And previously, we had that we're making into manure and that transportation is a problem. And my question is there any seed or the control of the waterization? Is there anything is there? It is the latest. And another thing I would like to tell, and we are using drones and other things also. For that also, as per NVPDC, we are using the larvicides and adulticides. Here my question is there any plant larvicides are there from medicinal plants?
Sure.
It will be more useful for the entire municipalities people are there. And another, our last question, sir, we are doing the Internet of Things regarding fogging because many complaints are coming in fogging people. So we find out just Internet of Things, we are doing, we find out one device from innovative people came and they have given to keep it, sir. But we are getting results, we have taken it.
Sure.
But we need a constant, innovative people are coming, but there is no sustainability of the thing because the project is coming, they are leaving and going. Sustainability should be there, they are going to another project also, they have to see the whole project also, then only the sustainability comes.
Doctor, my request is, since Inkwash is based in Hyderabad and Professor Chari and Malani are very well known to all of you in the government of Telangana and GHMC, my request is that you pick up that question offline with both of them, even as we go for final comments from all the panelists. And I'd request Pravinya, when you do your comment, if you could also respond to Mr. Kasba's point and the lady in the green, and combine your rest of the closing remarks. I'll start with Ms. Harichandana. Ms. Harichandana, thank you so much for your patience in the digital format. Last comments from you on the role of government in replicating WASH innovations at scale.
Like I said, the scale Inkwash has been very, very helpful. We have done a lot of initiatives which were discussed during Inkwash during my tenure in GHMC as well as in the district here. One thing I would like to mention was that we were discussing these mobile toilets for women earlier. And once we started the mobile toilet in Narayanpet, in fact in a rural area, creating a mobile toilet for women was unheard of. But we did it because we thought there was a lot of population which was gathering at shandies or temples or these kind of gatherings which are random and not continuous. So when we did that, it was quite a revelation for all of us, I would say, and that has taken up the attention across the country. And across Telangana also, we have put mobile toilets across the state, which with about 300 mobile toilets being implemented by all the municipalities. And also, this just started as one initiative, which was just costing us 11 lakhs. So we start small, we look at how the practical implementation can be, and then we can scale it up. So it's definitely possible, and there are brilliant ideas coming out from every sector. So we need to factor in all that, and platforms like Inkwash give us that benefit of getting together ideas from different sectors, because we are more focused on implementation. Maybe we need inspiration. So we are getting that from Inkwash, I would say, and such forums, and we get to hear so many perspectives. Even today, we've learned so much. So that is very important for all of us, and these kind of discussions are needed to keep us on the path, as well as keep us thinking ahead and looking towards the future. So
any one key takeaway or at least a statement of intent that you're able to put out, say on procurement reforms or on allocating untied funds to innovations, or I don't mean to put you on a spot, but any top of the head thoughts on anything that you'll go back to your desk and work on arising out of this conversation?
Yeah, actually a few of the innovations which just started out small and worked out, like I said, I just spoke about the mobile toilets. Also another initiative which started in Hyderabad and then took off across the country was the loo toilet concept, where loo cafes we had started, which were self-sustaining models. So it just started with one pilot in Madhapur, where we could, and I think they're part of your panel, earlier panel also. So now they have gone big. So it just starts with a small spark, and it needs to have a lot of persistence from all the actors, and then we are all, we can definitely make it a go. So all those innovators out there, I would just say keep going, and just don't lose hope. Sometimes an idea will not have the right time. If when I remember, I was talking about recycling at that time. Hyderabad was talking about it. Initially, we had a lot of people laughing at us when we tried to make recycled tiles, and there was a few startups. There was just one startup at that time which had come up with this idea, and we were implementing it. So we shouldn't lose the game. We should keep going and keep looking forward to the future.
Thank you so much, Ms. Harichandana. We've totally run out of time, so maybe instead of closing comments, one big aspiration or takeaway for you, Dr. Reddy, one thing that you think the government can and should do. You yourself came up with a lot of one thing that you think the government should start right away for replicating WASH innovations.
At the outset, I should acknowledge and congratulate and appreciate the efforts of Government of Telangana, especially Municipal Administration and Urban Development Department. What they have done, they have taken us, that is ASCII, as a knowledge partner. That itself shows how the ambitions are going to be implemented. And because of that academic and practitioner collaboration, the ambitions can be transformed into actual sustainable practices. Collaboration is the one thing. So one sentence, if you this thing. Generally, even government lo unnappudu emantamante evaranna technologists lu vallu villu vaste, if the technologists or some innovators come, Babu, this is not giving a lecture in the class. This is actual governance. We face a lot of, that's how we react. In the same way, academicians also will say, వాళ్ళకి ఎంత చెప్పినా అర్థం కాదు, వాళ్ళ బిజీలో వాళ్ళు ఉంటారు ఆఫీసర్స్ అని వాళ్ళు అంటారు. కానీ దిస్ ఇస్ ద ఫస్ట్ టైం దట్ ది అకాడమిషియన్స్ అండ్ ద గవర్నమెంట్ అండ్ ద ASCII, I belong to ASCII, we have come together to understand each other and then bridge a gap between the innovator startups and the communities. That is what I want.
Same question? Okay. So I'd say one is, think about when we are building solutions, we need to think about how they integrate with other issues and how they will be operated and maintained. Because 100 rupees spent, if it doesn't work, you've got a minus 100% return on your investment. It's better to spend 110, 120 and make sure it actually works in the long term. I think setting high standards is very important. We can have some debate on that issue. climate change is a problem today. It is affecting quality of life of people today. And climate change, pollution, and unsustained or unmanaged urbanization is going to kill us in the next 30 years. We have to start addressing it. If not 20 years ago, we have to start today. Solutions are not expensive. They pay for themselves, but they have to be done thoughtfully, and they have to be done with a holistic perspective of the life cycle cost, not just looking at minimizing the upfront installation cost. I would say that if we can do that and the monitoring, I think we'll solve a lot of problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Manas. Last word to you, Praveena, if you could also cover the two comments that came in and also any other responses to the conversations that happened so far. Last word to you.
Thank you. I think responding to the question given by Ms. Ahuja, I think every project has its time, and there is a peak period at which it can actually take off. So like what Chanda ma'am was mentioning, there are some projects, though it is very popular in the startup circles and the innovators, it is not yet fruitful enough for the government to take over and replicate on a larger scale. But when government does decide that this is something that has to be done, it will be taken up no matter where the funds are coming from and how much effort is required. So probably those solid waste management rules came in 2016. I think over the last 2 years is when we have actually made solid efforts towards investing in it in terms of finance or human resources and time also. So I think building on the last 2 years experience, I see very significant changes happening in the sector in the next 5-6 years. So that is answering your question. And just to sum it all up, I would like to mention that Warangal has always been ASCI's guinea pig. I think Professor Chari and Malini would agree to that. And we are very happy to be working with ASCI in Warangal because they have been one of the role model or ideal innovators for us. Because whenever they come to us with a pilot that they want to do, all they ask is, please give us permission to test this pilot in this particular area. These are the outcomes that we want to show you. And based on this, then we can take it forward. And we are more than happy to let them do it because we want to see what is going to come out of such an innovation. And we have had 2-3 such good collaborations. Apart from ASCI, we have a collaboration with ITC for managing our 26 dry resource collection centers. And it is providing employment to a lot of SHG women who are actively involved in this process. And third is recently during the Smart Cities Nurturing Neighborhood Challenge, also we tied up with WRI. And they've provided us brilliant designs to help convert public spaces into places where people can sit or children can play. And even with WRI, it was a very easy working relationship because they came in with a lot of ideas and they were there to handhold the entire process through. So the most important thing for government or in a ULB is all the staff, including me or my subordinate staff, are very occupied with a diverse set of subjects at any point of time. So we may not be able to be there at every day, every week to handhold the project which is going on, but we request the innovators to actually take more interest in more steps to settle the ground level issues also. And with respect to the risk appetite, which I think has been discussed quite a lot, the takeaway that I think we can have for all the government officials here is we could probably start looking at taking smart risks, not just risk as such, but there is something called a smart risk which can be taken in terms of how we modify the tender processes or how we see where the challenges can be met on the same platform. Now, the easiest thing for us to do is to replicate. I think you can ask any government official or the innovators when they've approached us that this is what we want to do. The main 2-3 questions that we ask is, what is the amount that would be needed? Second, what is the time frame in which you can actually deliver this? Third, has it been done anywhere else? So if these 3 questions get the correct response, it is very easy for us to replicate and also make necessary changes as per the ground conditions. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bottom line, one is the innovators would need to engage with budgetary allocations in government, procurement rules in government, and with the capacities, implementation capacities of government and operate at that intersection. They need to better understand that and engage at that intersection. Otherwise, that becomes a constraint in scaling the pilot. And therefore, we need more forums like the T-Hubs, the V-Hubs, more importantly, Inkwash itself, to build trust and engagement between academics, business, civil society, and government. But for the startups and innovators, engaging with these details becomes very important. I guess the bottom line really is the God and devil lie in the details. You need to know what the account head is. You need to know the clauses in the procurement reforms. You need to make sure that you don't just issue a rule or a regulation for an STP in an apartment complex, but you follow through to see that it is actually working. Engage on the details. Back to you, Malini.
Thank you so much.